When I was a grumpy teenager, this was one of my favorite places in the world to come. It's a quiet rock, was about a 10-minute walk from my house, where I could just come and sit in the middle of a booming little mining town. It was a busy place, and I used to like to come here just to get away. Welcome to Snow Lake. This is the little mining town where I live. I'm lucky enough, or I think I'm lucky enough, to be living now where I grew up. I was born and raised here, and I've been back here for about 10 years working as a teacher now. I've got 2 little boys that go to the same school I work in. When I was a kid, this place had about 2,500 people in it. It was a booming little town. Now we've gone through some tough times. There's only about 1,000 people here, but it's still a busy little place. But that's okay, because one thing is that we've learned over the last couple of years is about the idea that geography in a lot of ways is becoming irrelevant. I can work here, I can live here, and I don't have to worry about being isolated or in a little rural community someplace way out in the bush, as the kids in my class will tell you. Education used to be about preparing kids to work here, to work where you lived. But now we know that in a lot of ways that's not really true. Education is a vital national resource. It's a vital international resource. It can change people's lives, and it has that potential to really make or break, in a lot of ways, people's future. Classroom 2.0 is about meeting that challenge head on. Classroom 2.0, in a lot of ways, is about redefining what happens in classrooms. It's about meeting reality head on, facing it for what it is. The world has changed. Friedman has told us that, and a lot of us know that as well. And that's another thing that's really important. Classroom 2.0 isn't about us sitting around waiting for somebody to tell us this is how you should do things. Classroom 2.0 is about us. It's about change. It's about us figuring out what we need to do to make sure the kids in our classrooms are prepared to meet that future head on. Geography is irrelevant, but knowledge isn't. Classroom 2.0 is about change. Of that, there can be no doubt. But it's about more than just using fancy tools. It's about more than saying, well, I'm blogging, I'm doing new things. Classroom 2.0 is about changing what happens in classrooms, changing the possibilities in classrooms, no matter whether you live in a place like this or in a place that's surrounded by big buildings. Classroom 2.0 is really about us. We've been learning a lot, and we still obviously have a lot to learn. But when I'm thinking of these kind of classrooms, when I'm thinking of these spaces where things are different, where things that happen are new, there's really a couple of factors that I'm mainly thinking about. And the most important one is not using tools. The most important one is pedagogy. It's in teaching. We have to change the way we teach. If we continue to teach kids to memorize, to spit information back out at us, we're not helping anyone. We're not solving any of the world's problems, and we're certainly not helping them get a job with an employer who wants somebody who can think creatively and differently. So the first piece of this puzzle is in pedagogy. We need to look at our teaching, look at how we teach. The second one, I think, obviously, is tools. Because in a lot of ways, these classrooms are about collaboration. Collaboration between students local, between students and their teacher, between students in a school, between different classrooms, and even between students that are international. We've seen a lot of projects in the past year that have shown that this is possible. So the tools are obviously important. But it's not just any tool. It's about tools that promote collaboration, that make it easy for kids to talk to each other, Make it easy for them to exchange ideas and viewpoints, and make it easy for them to make connections. The idea is about learning, so let's get the focus on there. Another important factor in these kind of spaces is the relationship we have to information. Information is vital. It's not like 20 years ago when we had the kids in our classroom and all we had was the textbooks that were sitting on the shelves. The relationship we have to information and the relationship that we promote with the kids in our classroom is extremely important. We want them to see themselves as people who are legitimate creators of information, who are questioners of information, who are able to see if things are real, to be able to tell truth from fiction, bias, viewpoint. All these kinds of things are extremely vital. That's not just to be a good employee for some company. That's to be a good citizen, to be a good thinker, no matter where you live. The last factor, I think, is one that unfortunately we in classrooms don't often have a lot of control over, and that's our curriculum. Most of us have a mandated curriculum, and that's fine. I'm not saying don't teach it. We obviously need to. But our relationship to that curriculum and what's in that curriculum needs to undergo constant change. We need to be constantly looking at our curriculum and trying to decide what is it that's important in there. What do those kids need? So the curriculum that we look at is probably the last piece of the puzzle. And that's true for kids around the world. It doesn't matter whether you're living in a place like this or
here in Los Angeles.
Here in Melbourne.
School doesn't start here till about 9, but I like to leave early. I usually go about 7, just to make sure I'm ready for the day, get everything set up that I can. So come on, come for a walk. Are you tired? We made it. That was just over 2 kilometers, or, just a little bit better than a mile for you folks that are still in that way. In my classroom, we use a lot of different things. We add tools throughout the year as times go by. We usually start off with blogging. We move into things like RSS feeds, talk about information, the collection of information. From there, we'll do things like using Flickr maybe. We'll talk about podcasting. This year we're using VoiceThread, something new that we've never tried before. But it's all about those tools. And that's one thing really that we haven't talked about yet, is the idea that a classroom like this that's concerned with information, concerned about relationships, local and international relationships, really relies very heavily on internet-based tools. And that's fine, and it's very vital, but we need to understand that our tools are very important. That's why one of the first things I want to do is I want to put out a big thanks to companies like VoiceThread, companies like Wikispaces, companies like EduBlogs, which are working very, very hard to make sure that these tools are free. They're free for teachers, they're free for students. Without folks like you, we couldn't do the kind of things that we're trying to do in our classrooms. It's the beginning of day 2. I had hoped to do one of these yesterday, but you know how day 1s go in classrooms. It just didn't quite work out. So here I sit, classroom ready to go, waiting for kids to come in. And as I sit here and think about the beginning of this year, I've been thinking about the idea of relationships. And that's a lot of what these kind of classrooms are about. There's a lot of different factors that go into it, but mostly, when I think of change in a classroom, I think of change in, it's about power. These kind of classrooms change the relationships between people that are possible, between me and my students, between my students and other kids around the world, other people they can learn from around the world. And it also changes the relationship between them and the information that they can access. They're now prosumers. They're as active making information and creating information as they are consuming it. And that idea of networks is just vital. Today is day 2 of our regular school year. Yesterday afternoon, we already started setting up our weblogs. We didn't get finished, we didn't get very far, and today we've got a lot further way to go. But I want to establish that right from the beginning of the year, that that's important. It's important to have a place online where you can meet other people, where you can write your own thoughts, your own questions, your own troubles you've got. And it's a place where you can get into relationship with other people. I mean, we need to protect our kids. We need to teach our kids to be safe. And actually, that's the first assignment that I've got set up, is ideas about internet safety. But I wanted to establish that right at the beginning of the year. Day 1, relationships are important. Tomorrow, day 3 in school, we've got a Skype call with Lucy Martin's class in Los Angeles at St. Elizabeth School. I want to set the tone right at the beginning of the year with the kids. This classroom isn't about me. It's not necessarily even about them as individuals. It's about us and about what we can all do together, what we can learn together, and what we can learn from the people out there. There's 1 billion connected people around the world. That's powerful. You know what I haven't talked about yet is the thing that I actually think is the most important of all about change in classrooms. And it really has nothing to do with changing anything except ourselves. I think the most important thing that needs to change when we think about changing classrooms is our attitudes towards classrooms and towards education. And not only us as teachers, but really society's attitude towards education. Society has an idea of what classrooms should look like. They think they have an idea of what should happen in those spaces. But that idea is probably about 20 years old. And that idea needs to change. The most important factor in thinking about classrooms that are like this, about Classroom 2.0, is really redefining what happens in those classrooms. Redefining what we think should happen in those classrooms. Because that's the most important thing we can change. If we think education is a place where teachers photocopy worksheets and kids sit in nice straight rows and do them, then that's the kind of education we're going to get. But if we change our attitude towards classrooms and look at classrooms in a new way, look at classrooms in a new light, that really allows us to redefine the things that go on there. It redefines the kind of activities that are acceptable. It redefines what those spaces can look like. And it redefines how schedules are made in those places. I like to think about the idea of classrooms as studios. And that's very different. A classroom, when you say that word to most people get the idea, like I said, of long straight rows filled with kids. A studio is really different. A studio has lots of different things going on. Not everybody's doing the same thing. It's probably a little bit noisier than your idea of a classroom is. But you see, just by adjusting that attitude, just by making that one change, it opens up all kinds of possibilities. Classrooms happen in 40-minute blocks. Studios probably happen late at night. Classrooms happen with very little noise and everybody doing the same thing. Studios are different. Studios are vibrant spaces with a lot of energy, with somebody who's a master, who's in charge of that space. And they give us a very different idea about what classrooms can be like. So really, I think the first thing we need to adjust as we go on this journey is our attitude about what classrooms can be like. I thought this was an appropriate place to finish this off. Me sitting in my living room, in front of my iMac. It's where we often meet. I started filming this actually about 5 weeks ago. It was about the 3rd week of August, and here it is, the beginning of October now. And in that time, it already seems like a lot has changed. One of the biggest quotes that hit me this fall actually came from Will Richardson's blog. It's a quote by Tom Carroll, and that is that teaching today is a collective effort, not an individual accomplishment. I think that's really true. And I think that's also true of learning. Learning today is a collective effort and not an individual accomplishment. We've really seen that this fall with the emergence of networks. Alan November's quote in Shanghai at the Learning 2.0 conference is a big one too. The idea that every classroom should be a global communication center. That changes things. That has to make us look at education and learning in a new light. And that also is a huge idea. The idea that learning is something that is networked. Learning is something that we do together. And really, when we look at the way that the globe is going, that's something that we really need to consider. So finally, that brings me to a blog post by Dean Sharesky. And that's called Why Technology Assessments Suck. I agree with Dean. I think most of them do. And that's because they concentrate way too much on skills. Can a kid highlight text? Can they make things bold? So what? That's not what technology's for. Technology's about connections. Technology's about us being able to get together, learn from each other, see new things. And that's why, really, I want to close with a call for somebody with a lot more brains than me to build something. And that's the idea of education informatics. It's something we don't have, and it can really close that piece of technology assessments. We really need a way to track kids' activity in classrooms. We need to be able to see where they're going, where they're commenting, who they're reading, what blogs they keep going back to, who visits them. Let's see their network. Let's see how that changes things. Once we know these ideas a little better, then we'll be able to adjust our practices in classrooms. But right now, we don't have a way to do that. We've got a huge hole. So that idea of informatics is something that is vital. And I think it's a missing piece as the new networks emerge. So that's it. That's my ideas about Classroom 2.0. If you've made it this far, thanks for sticking with me. If you've got any questions, any arguments, anything you don't agree with, send me an email. Let me know what I can do for you. Thanks for sticking around.